It's member-supported Hawaii Public Radio, all things considered, and I'm Dave Lawrence. We're here in our Atherton Performing Arts Studio. It's one of my very favorite rooms to get to do anything in, even if I don't have John Hammond hanging out with me. How you doing? Good to see you.
Very good. It's very nice to be back in Hawaii.
Well, it's wonderful to have you back in Hawaii, and because you've been here before, I just want to double-check. Have you been in the Atherton before, or is this a debut experience?
No, this will be my first time.
Okay. Well, we were just hearing some nice talk about your previous experiences, so maybe that's a good way to start, because sometimes cats have not been to Hawaii, as you can imagine. There's all kinds of groups and individuals making their first visit ever to the islands, and often their first visit to the Atherton, although we have plenty of repeat people, too. Thinking of Hawaii, I know there's a submarine attached to at least one story, but what comes to mind when you think of playing here, coming here, maybe a first time in the Aloha State?
Well, the first time I played in Hawaii was in 1969. It was in Diamond Head. The headliners were Delaney and Bonnie and Love.
Wow.
And it was intense. It was just, I had no idea what to expect, and it was just overwhelming. I stayed a few extra days. I went out into the other end of the island where there was somebody had a hunting lodge or something, and it was just amazing, beautiful, awesome. And then I've been back, maybe 8 or 9 times since with my wife Marla, and we've gone to Maui often. We've had good times there, and the last time we were in Hawaii was in Oahu here, and we played at the Waikiki Jazz Festival.
Nice.
And that was wonderful. It put us upstairs in a beautiful room with 2 lanais, and just took the elevator down to work. I like that kind of gig.
I can see from the smile on your face. You did like it. It sounds like a nice place, the picture that you paint. His latest record is timeless. He's going to be tonight, Honoka'a People's Theater. He is Saturday, Iao Theater. Sunday, KCC Performing Arts Center. Back in Honolulu Tuesday for Hawaiian Brians. And when it can go both ways, obviously. With a dad like yours, I was going to say it factors into your musical inspiration, but what I understand is it's a certain Jimmy Reed record that might have sparked it. Where would you paint the picture for how you gravitated to be this cat that we have?
Oh, gee, that's kind of a tough call. I remember when I was 7 years old, 1949, my father brought me to hear Big Bill Brunzi, who was one of the great folk blues players from the 20s and the 30s. He had become a real ambassador of blues music, had spent a lot of time in Europe, and anyway, he was playing this show in New York, and I went and I was so impressed. I mean, to this day, I can remember how I was impressed by that. And ever since then, I've sort of gravitated towards blues music, and I've always felt somehow connected. I don't know. I can't explain it really. In terms of my style of playing, I heard Robert Johnson's music for probably the first time in 1958. And I was a blues fan at that point, but I had never heard the really early country blues that really knocked me out. In 1958 or so, I saw Jimmy Reed play at the Apollo Theater in New York. And I'd never seen anyone play guitar and harmonica at the same time, and I was very impressed. And when I got a guitar in 1960, and I started playing professionally in 1962, and I incorporated the harmonica rack, and pretty much what I'm doing today.
Is that part of the... It's kind of like when you do something for a very long time, it becomes hard to step away from it because both you have the passion for what you're doing, but there's a certain comfort, too, in that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've styled my whole life has revolved around playing and touring, and I've been on the road for 54 years. Right. It's kind of, part of me, I guess. I can't imagine not doing it.
And it must make traveling a lot easier after having done it for so long.
Yes, I'm also very fortunate. My wife, Marla, travels with me everywhere, so we get to share the experience. And we've been all over the world. It's been amazing.
And you left college to be... I mean, so a lot of cats do this. And I mean, sometimes there are people who have done that. There are other people who stayed on in school. I was thinking of John Oates from Hall & Oates when we had this whole talk about his value of getting his degree from Temple. But when you dabbled in it, but just found...
I went to college in 1960, and I was a painter, an art student. I had gone to art schools for a long time, so that was my comfort zone. And my first day in Art 101, I realized that this isn't what I really wanted to do. I bought a guitar, and there was a guy on the campus who played this. He was a really fantastic blues player named Ian Buchanan. He had actually played in coffee shops in Greenwich Village. Ooh. And he had a student of his named, they called him Jerry Kalkinen, but it was Jorma Kalkinen. Right. So I got to know these guys, and I used to watch them play. And I got into it. A year and a half later, I was out in California playing professionally. It happened very quickly. I knew pretty much when I got that guitar, that's what I wanted to do. I knew all the songs.
Is Jorma still a bud?
Oh, yeah, man. Well, he had his 75th birthday reunion party at the Beacon Theater in New York City, and he invited me to be part of it. I've stayed friends with him for 56 years.
How about Jack?
Jack, I've known Jack through Yorma, but I've known him a long time.
Can you stand?
Oh, have you? Oh, God.
So it's like,
well, they're great guys. And,
it's always great tying these things together right in the Atherton. It's kind of goofy like that. And they've stayed together. Talk about an enduring thing,
great
right?
friends. Well, Yorma's a very special person, and he's very, very deep.
He is deep, and that's a great word to think about some of the cats you're associated with. When I mentioned that you were going to be an upcoming guest on the program, certain names get just thrown out. People associate with you, and they thought it would be worth, like, for example, the other day downstairs we were listening to the fantastic live version of In Memory of Elizabeth Reed from live at the Fillmore East from the Allman Brothers. And I was mentioning to my boss, Bill, it's Dickie takes the first solo, then Greg does the keyboard in the middle, and then Duane takes that lightning second solo. And these are years. When I was younger, the Duane one was really close to me, but as I grown older, I kind of like now the Dickie one, I feel even, attached to it too.
Both talented guys, but Duane had that little extra thing.
Right.
And Duane was the force behind the band. I mean, he really put it together and had the cojones to put it together and made it happen. I met Duane before he formed the Allman Brothers Band, and he was sat in on a recording date of mine in Muscle Shoals, 1969. And we became really good friends, and he was just so talented and such a great guy. They actually opened a show for me in St. Paul, Minnesota in 1969, 70, just when they first got started. So, and then I opened a lot of shows for them after that.
We really got robbed of him with that.
Oh, man.
With that accident. I mean, when you think about things that come to mind about either his playing or just memories of the kind of person he was, I always look at people who we lost so early. We don't learn as much about the kind of person they are. We can sit and enjoy the solos, look at pictures, sometimes video if we're lucky.
Yeah.
But Duane, not a cat that I've heard a lot of personal stories of. What's a story that comes to mind of associating being there, hanging with him, maybe just something that identifies the good guy that he was?
Well, I was hanging out in Muscle Shoals. I'd been sent there by Atlantic to record with Marlon Green producing, and it was going kind of tough. I was having a hard time communicating with the studio band there, who had recorded with Aretha and with Wilson Pickett and all these R&B guys. And one of the studio guys was Eddie Hinton, and Eddie was a phenomenal songwriter, guitar player, just great singer, very much in the Otis Redding vein. And he said, a friend of mine is going to be over here tomorrow. I think you'd really like to meet him. This is Duane, who I had never met her. So this Duane and Barry Oakley arrived in an abandoned milk truck, and he had a T-shirt that said "City Slicker" on it. And then, he had this long hair and a ponytail. In 1969 in Alabama, that's
right?
Some cojones.
Right.
And he was fearless. And so we played some stuff, and I had my National steel guitar, and he says, "Oh, you know that Taj Mahal song, Statesboro Blues?" I said, "Wait a minute." And I told him, this is a Blind Willie McTell song.
That he was made popular.
And so Duane all of a sudden got into, all these old time slide players, and he was just phenomenal. He had those ears.
What a great story, because then for a lot of younger folks who don't know as much lineage about that tune, they'd associate it with the brothers, of course.
Yeah.
And all the way through to this date. And it's funny that you mentioned it had Taj talking about all the same stuff in the same chair that you've been in,
Yeah, I know.
right here in this room. So we're completing a lot of circles. You mentioned the Atlantic. Ahmet Erdogan, did you ever have the chance?
Ahmet, sure, and Nesui and Jerry Wexler. And
Was he a powerful presence just to be?
Oh, yeah. I mean, talk like this, I'm going to send you down to Muscle Shoals.
no, he was quite a guy. I can't believe, they're not there. I've had so many recording experiences, going back. 1962, I made my first record. I'd been playing for less than a year and made my first album. And, I've had a chance to, well, in the beginning when I was hanging out in the Village in New York before I went to California, it was me and John Sebastian, Richie Havens, Jose Feliciano, a guy who called himself Juan Moreno, but I think his name was Jerry Cohen. And we used to go wandering around playing in little basket houses in New York and in the Village. And at the end of the evening, we'd take our change that we made and go to the Kettle of Fish, a bar on McDougal Street, and have beers and talk music and stuff. John Sebastian was unbelievable. Jose was unbelievable. Richie Havens was just all these guys were just phenomenal, and they all went on to make it big time.
Yeah.
I knew Dylan really well when he first came to New York, and he went to my recording sessions. I went to his, and
Aren't you the guy who recommended the band Cats to him?
I introduced them to Bob at the 1964, the So Many Roads album that I made for Vanguard. And the next thing I knew, they were his band.
And how did that intro happen?
In New York City, on 14th Street.
And you just thought this would be a good...
Anybody that heard these guys would flip out. I mean, I didn't want them to be my band or anything. They were their own band, Levon and the Hawks. They had been Ronnie Hawkins' backup band in Toronto, and they made tours down to the Jersey Shore, played at clubs like Tony Mart and stuff. It was, and then Joey D's Starlighter Lounge and the Broadway area. I mean, these were characters, really cool guys, and so anyway, I feel like I had a little something to do with Bob getting together with them.
Right. No, that's what it sounds like. And at that time, you have really particular guitars that you identify with in terms of a player. Had you already come to that?
Well, the first guy I met who could really play, electric style blues, was Michael Bloomfield, who I met in Chicago in 1961. And he knew Muddy Waters and Howling Wolf and Little Walter and all those guys. And they would call him up on the bandstand to sit in. He was 17. I was 18. Oh, my. Michael was incredible. So that was my first, hearing, a dynamic lead guitar player of my own age, and then Robbie Robertson and Duane Allman, and it just goes on and on. Duke Robillard, Charlie Beatty. These are phenomenal players that I've had a chance to record with and tour with.
What's a John Lee Hooker thing that comes to mind?
I met John Lee Hooker in 1963 in Toronto. he had arrived on the bus from Detroit, and I was going to be the opening show for him at this little club called the Penny Farthing in Toronto, in the Yorkville area. And so I'm waiting for this 7-foot guy to walk in the door. You know, I imagined him eating 4 chickens at once. I mean, his voice was like unbelievable. And this little guy wanders in with this funky little guitar and the voice, and I said, "Oh my God!" So that's when I first met John Lee, and then I got to be on a lot of shows with him, and got to know him as a friend, and recorded with him. He recorded with me. I felt like, ooh, kind of nice.
But a real relationship, though, beyond playing, and a relationship of friendship. And
Well, I never really hung out, at his home or anything like that, because I've been on the road,
Yeah.
like.
You were busy.
So, when I was in the Bay Area, I'd, see him sometimes. He would come to a gig of mine, or I'd go to one of his, and we had the same agent. And so we were on tours together often in Europe and all through the U.S. and Canada.
He was a phenomenal cat, and a lot of people have so many different
He was.
experiences with. Sometimes that's also neat when someone like yourself has had a career that's so long. There are different eras where different people sort of populate it, right?
That's right.
More than other eras, and it's not just because they're alive, but just the way touring and agents sometimes, record labels, sort of thing works out. Little big man, Dustin Hoffman.
Ooh, that was interesting. In 1970, I'd just come back from a tour with Delaney, Bonnie, and friends, and Billy Preston in a bus, not a touring bus, a bus. And we've been on the road for about a month playing in Utah and Oklahoma and Texas. It was just a rough tour. I got home and the phone rang, and this guy said, "My name is Stuart Millar, and I'm a producer, and we have a film, and we'd like to hear you play." I said, "Well, I've made 5 records, you could hear what I sound like." And he said, "No, we'd like to actually see you and hear you play." And I mentally flipped a coin and said, okay. So I went up to a sound studio where they showed me a 5-hour film called Little Big Man. And this is before it was edited. It was just, raw.
Tape.
And I said, well, the music I play, didn't exist then. He said, it doesn't matter, it'll work. And I met Arthur Penn, the director, who was responsible for doing Bonnie and Clyde with Flatt and Scruggs playing the background music and stuff. So it was really intense. They flew me out to Hollywood, and I recorded live to the film, and it was a big deal. I remember I got paid $1,100 for it, and it was an $11 million movie, which is more than any movie had ever cost. And but over the years, it's paid off big time.
Is that how it just keeps?
Well, I did the whole soundtrack, so I got the credit for that, and BMI sends me a check every year. So
Continues to work like that.
Yeah.
As they continue to sell it as DVD, then digital.
yeah, but it's on TV every now and
And
then.
that.
Yeah, it played in the same theater in Paris for 5 years or something unbelievable.
You, when it comes to choosing your sets that folks are going to hear as you work your way through the islands, and especially this particular era in your life, or is there anything in particular you want to give people a heads up in terms of what they can expect, or perhaps maybe for newcomers?
Well, I usually say before I start the show, I'm going to play whatever I feel like. And everybody laughs, and that's good because I don't really plan a show. There's some songs that I tend to play every night. But, I let things come to me. I know 500 songs or so.
Right.
And I probably recorded 500 songs over the years.
And you intersperse some of the great stories because you're just filled.
Now, in the last 10 years or so, I've started to actually talk on the stage, which I never used to do. I used to just play the songs. Either went over, they didn't, whatever. But now I can reflect on stuff, and everybody really enjoys that. So I'm getting a little reflective in my old age.
Are there cats from throughout your life that you still feel tight with? Maybe some of those performers from the 60s and the early 70s, or any of them guys that you still think of in terms of just a friendship that you might call just to talk to, catch up with?
Yeah, there are a lot of guys who I don't really hang out with that much anymore because, like I say,
You're working.
I'm working, or when we're home, they're home and they're my age, so they got their things to do. Yorma is like a friend. I'll know him as a friend my whole life, and John Sebastian is another. And
Clapton?
I'm sorry?
Clapton?
Eric, I don't know really all that well. I've played with him, and I've toured with him, got to know him a little bit when I was over in England. There's so many artists that I've met that if I'm in their area and I hang out with Rick Estrin, Duke Robillard, Charlie Beatty, these are guys I've recorded with and toured with. And I lost a friend just last year who played drums with me when I had my little band on the road, Charles Otis, and that was heavy. He was a real kind of a mentor to me in a lot of ways, and every now and then, I just lost a friend last month who I grew up with, Jeremy Steig, a phenomenal jazz flute player, and he had moved to Japan, and that happens, and but he was, I guess, my oldest friend.
Are you a spiritual guy?
Oh, I think everybody's a spirit, and some more connected than others. But I really, I feel very blessed. I feel very fortunate in my life to have the spirit, whatever it is, come through me.
Any causes or concerns you want to give visibility to while you're here? Is there anything that you're real passionate about that's happening out there? Animals, diseases, anything in particular?
Well, I care about the planet and the environment. I care about the political scene looks kind of crazy right now. I would like to see everything come back to negotiations and to peace and the idea that there can be peace. But I like to think that you could have learned something in the last 100 years about the environment and stuff. What's going on? I think the music that I love so much is really important stuff, and blues music is, probably the roots of most American music.
Like your latest record, it is timeless.
I like to think I thought that was a good way of describing blues music.
I figured as much. It's Friday, tonight, Honoka'a People's Theater, Saturday, EL Theater, Sunday, KCC Performing Arts Center, and then Tuesday, back in Honolulu at Hawaiian Brian's, guitarist, songwriter John Hammond in our HPR Atherton Performing Arts Studio. It just sounds so nice in this room, and it's been a pleasure hearing your voice.
I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you for being here.
What a pleasure.